Welcome to Seeking Focus, Episode 8, all about bicycles, photography, and videography.
And cool people.
Cool, yeah.
Welcome to Seeking Focus, a podcast that provides photographers and videographers with a place to critically compare technology, share ideas, and enhance their skills.
So, welcome back to another week. How are you, Marty?
I'm going well, man. I'm going well. Just everything is picked up again, which is a good thing. And just flying my drones, getting lost at La Trobe University. I picked up a new client at La Trobe and drive into that place. It's just a maze. It's like little city.
Yeah, it is.
It's amazing.
My brother actually went to university there, and it was a maze even back then. Now they've expanded it as well. So yeah.
You walk in and there's just buildings, car parks, and just everything everywhere. It's just pretty impressive. But yeah, other than that, yeah, same. Not much. I don't know. All right, how's your week been?
Yeah, not bad. I picked up a couple of new clients. One of the things that I love about photography and videography is every day it's something different. 2 days ago I was working with models and ears and jewelry. Today I was working with chemical plants. So it's from one day to the next, there's so much variety. Yeah. It's amazing.
You meet all different people and, you sort of learn also all those different industries. And I think it's great. What we do is like, I enjoy it anyway. So, yeah. It's great to meet people and get out there and understand different things, which is good.
Definitely.
What have we got today, man?
Okay, today we've got a special guest in the studio with us. Someone who I admire deeply. His name is Daniel Brooks. He is a photographer, and he does a lot of stuff in the mountain biking area, which we're big fans of mountain biking. But welcome. How are you?
Great, mate. Thank you for inviting me in.
Fabulous. So just a little bit of background. You do a lot of the mountain biking photography around Melbourne and in Victoria generally. Do you do interstate stuff as well, or just predominantly in Victoria?
Yeah, obviously when the we haven't got COVID happening and we're allowed to travel. I've been everywhere across Australia essentially. I've shot a couple of events up in Cairns, the World Cup in 2014. And the World Championships that were held there in 2017. Tasmania I travelled to quite a bit, so all across Australia.
Fabulous. I actually I met Dan probably about 4 years ago officially when Marty and myself were doing a photography walk in Melbourne City. Yep. At the time, Dan joined us, and I didn't realise who he was, but I had actually sort of met him a couple of months earlier. I was at a mountain biking event at the Yangs here in Victoria. And I was taking photos. So I was walking along and I was walking up the track, and I stumbled across this section, which was this big tree line sort of area. And as I looked up, I saw all these flashes hanging from the tree, and I thought, what in the world is happening here? Didn't realize.
Did it impress you, did it?
It caught my attention, definitely caught my attention. And so basically, I turned around and I saw this person there, but I didn't know who he was, and I just sat there and watched him for a while, and he had all these people around him, and he was like the Fonz.
The popular guy.
Hey. So I watched him for a while. I was very impressed. I got to see a lot of his photos afterwards, and I was like, wow. But when he came on the photography walk, I actually didn't put two and two together until after it had finished, and then I went, oh my God, it was him. It was him. And your work, Daniel, it's amazing. I love the work you do. You capture the moment. All the action is there. It's just fantastic. So thank you very much for coming in today.
Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for the kudos. Absolutely.
So I want to ask, how did you get into it in the first place?
Well, I've been mountain biking pretty much my whole life. But photography-wise, really it started, surprisingly enough, I was really into golf for quite a while. And I had this obsession with essentially going around Australia and playing, every golf course I could find. And I just love the environment that brought you into, they're perfectly manicured courses. And it just sort of lent itself perfectly to, shooting in early light and, really getting to know those sort of the composition of leading lines and, the environment and so forth. And while I was playing golf, I thought, why not take a whole bunch of photos? And I started selling them back to the golf clubs themselves. And it was around about the time, sort of mid to late 2000s, where golf courses were really starting to develop their websites and start putting in sort of virtual tours, if you like, on their website, so that people that wanting to visit can go in there and just check out what the course is like. So that was, essentially enough to really, after I sold them the videos back, the pictures back, I'd end up making my money back from paying for the round. So, and then that sort of then took me into landscape photography, and that together with mountain biking photography is really where I've become really passionate about, I think. And now I'm blessed to have a job that my day job isn't photography. My day job is a risk management consultant for an insurance company, and that involves a lot of travel around Victoria and Tasmania. And
just happens to coincide with the race days, right?
Yeah. And of course, every trip I take an extra couple of days, and find myself in the mountains of Tasmania or up in the alpine ranges of Victoria or wherever it might be. And that's that seems to complement very well with the interest of mountain biking. Really, I heard you talking about in one of your earlier episodes. You love the fact that the bikes take you out into places that you wouldn't normally see, and that's something I really get out of mountain biking as well. It's a little bit hard to take the inflatable 5 kilo camera and lens and all the rest of it out into riding into the rainforest, but whenever I can, I'll take my camera along and spend an extra couple of hours walking around the environment that I'm in and take photos at the same time.
Do you take your bike with you when you're traveling for work?
Yeah.
So you take your bike along? And
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah, pretty much every time I travel to Tasmania, I'll take the Spirit of Tasmania and load the bike up and the camera gear and everything else. And
that's impressive. Yeah. That's impressive. I love it.
He's living the life.
He is. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't complain about that, that's for sure.
So is work paying for the all the extra gear that
pretty
you have
much,
to
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good job then.
They pay for the travel, company car with a fuel card.
Boom.
We're in the wrong line of work.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, so
that's
great. That's impressive. I don't think many people could probably boast that. No, so not advantageous enough. All right. Back to that first time that I met you. Now, as I was walking up the hill, I noticed you had multiple flashes hanging underneath the tree. So can you explain to me the concept behind, I think it was like 3 flashes at different intervals. So they weren't all grouped together to get that nice bright color in one spot. Yeah. They were staggered. So give us a bit of a rundown of how you do your photography.
Well, I use a Canon 5D Mark IV. That's evolved over time. I've sort of gone from originally when I was shooting mountain bikes, I worked my way up from a 600D into a 6D, and now the 5D Mark IV. It's not ideal for mountain biking or sport photography, but it does the job. Certainly, it works. But I like to have that avenue to do landscape as well. So with the off-camera flash stuff, that was really an early influence, I suppose. One of my early influences for mountain bike photography was a guy by the name of Jason Stevens. He used to shoot a lot around Victoria, but also travel internationally to shoot World Cups. And he did a lot of that off-camera flash work. And essentially it involves at least 2 flashes you need to have, speed lights. And some transponders to control them. And what you're looking to do in most cases is have a light that lights up the front of the rider and a light that sort of provides you with that sort of sharp edge from behind the rider. So the rear light sort of provides a little bit of fill light around the environment, the immediate environment around the rider itself. These days I don't do that much of the off-camera flash work. It can be quite tricky to set up, and you've got to carry a lot more gear when you're walking around the mountainside. And there are some riders out there that don't like having a flash go off in their face as they're riding past at 60 k's an hour.
Yeah, well, why would that happen?
Despite the fact that you take as much care as possible to make sure that you're setting the flash up so that it's not directly in their line of sight, if you like. Like you wouldn't set it up on the inside of a corner as they're riding through.
One of those big massive drops.
Yeah,
they're about to just go down and they're blinded
Just
for that split second.
Yeah, that's right.
In some cases, off-camera flash work is almost compulsory. If you for example, if you're in the deep rainforests of Cairns, for example, you're just not going to get that ambient light to get a really quick shutter speed.
Yeah, so you get that blurred picture.
Exactly. Unless you're taking pan shots, which you can go down to 1/20th of a second. To get most of the sort of real still action shots that you're taking a 1,000th of a second or 1/1200th of a second, something like that. So you're very reliant on having a lot of flash to get a clear shot. That's I spent probably 2 or 3 years experimenting using that a lot at race events and also the odd client that would come out and want me to do promotional shots of their riders. And then nowadays having moved across to the Canon the 5D Mark IV, it's such a better camera. And with great lenses, you spend $3,000 on a lens. You're getting so much more light into the camera anyway, so there's not as much need to use artificial light.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the other side of it as well is using artificial light. I've found it's great to create a really sharp image, but it's very difficult to get a natural looking light.
I've never excelled at using flashes, so I try and stay away from them. So I always get that unnatural look, which I can't deal with afterwards. There's a lot of people who are really good at actually editing those afterwards, but I'm not one of those people. So everything that I've ever done has been without flash. Unless of course it's a function, in some closed, a wedding or a party or something like that, where you have no choice. But for that type of thing that you're doing, and that day that I actually came across you for the first time, I was actually doing all my shots without a flash. I was doing panning shots and stuff like that. And I got to say, a large proportion of them were blurry. So I can understand why you're using those. But sorry, I cut you off. So you're talking about not using those anymore nowadays.
That's right. I think my current influences, very few of them use off-camera flash work. Off-camera flashes, and I think you get more of the environment in your shot. With a flash, you light up the rider really well, but you don't tend to get the background that well lit up. I follow a guy by the name of Mad Dog Boris on Instagram. He's probably one of the most renowned mountain bike photographers in the world, I think. He follows around the Enduro World Series and the World Cups. And another guy by the name of Sven Martin. Both of them, very well-renowned mountain bike photographers. And they're more inclined to sort of get a natural looking exposure and use the real world light in their shots, and it's just so much more convenient as well, not having to carry around flashes, set up tripods on the side of the track, or like you saw me, sometimes you're having to strap a flash, a speed light to a tree branch somewhere, and but you still. It still leaves you with the odd challenge when you're in a very dark forest or something. But most of the time I'll just sort of try to change my composure these days to make up for that. So, like I said earlier, you're working generally at around 1/1200th of a second shot, which is hard to achieve in a very dark environment. That's when the riders are travelling at full speed. If they're travelling at, through a tight corner or over some very technical obstacles, often they'll slow down quite a bit, so you can reduce your shutter speed quite a bit. You won't go down, I don't find myself going down below sort of 800th of a second. if necessary, you can always boost your ISO up to 1,000 or something like that. I don't really like to go over that because you start to get a lot of grain. But
Mark IV should be able to handle that ISO, a little bit higher ISO.
Yeah,
it should handle it, but it does produce a bit of grain. Because I use
It
the Mark
does,
IV, yeah. So it's great for landscapes and stuff, but it does create a bit of a graininess, which I tend to not go over 1,000 as well.
Yeah,
I occasionally will drop it to 1,000, but I try and avoid that as well. But yeah, so it's not a Sony.
I don't know, man. I don't have that problem with Sony.
Yeah, it's not a Sony.
Daniel, can I just ask a question? You mentioned that you walk into the track and whatever else. Just walk me through your train of thought, if you can. How would you say, where would you set up? Like, would you know the track and then you go and you set up that sort of in a speed light or seat in a specific location?
Well, most tracks these days, I've been there God knows how many times before, so it's fairly unusual that I'll go to a venue and I don't know the track. But even then, most of the time, I'll walk along and just see whether they've created any new features or, whether there's anything. Right. Whether there's anything interesting that I want to actually capture. But most of the time, what I'm looking for is something where you're going to capture the riders where they're I like to think of it as in a dynamic body position. So when they're either just starting to go off a drop or, jumps are a classic one. But, even a simple turn into a berm, if you can capture them at the right moment, just as they're turning in, that is typically where you get the best the most appealing body position on a bike. The other thing I'd like to look for is, probably I didn't do it when I started. I'd admit that. I'd just go onto a track and take a million photos and hope that some of them turn out. But I put a lot more thought into composition these days. I look for leading lines. I think about the rule of thirds, obviously, where a lot of the time I'm trying to capture the bike in the front of the frame, and then with the track sort of disappearing off into the background.
That's a good idea.
Or I might say there's use a tree in the background to fill out the rest of the shot with the rider in the foreground. Or the other option is, you can obviously, the rider is obviously your subject, but you're taking more of a shot of the environment around it. So you sort of step back and the rider might take up just a third of the photo or even less.
So obviously different track will give you a different obviously perspective of that component. So there will be some obviously cases where you just try to capture the environment more than anything else with the rider in the environment. And then another section will be obviously just try to fill the frame with the rider itself. Cool.
I'm also known to go and put myself in some pretty stupid positions on the track to try and capture, the real danger of particularly downhill mountain biking.
That's how you get the shot. I mean, I used to do that with four-wheel drive racing, between the tree and the front wheel of the car flying past at 80 kilometers an hour, and you're like, I got the shot. And then you look back at it a few years later and you think, I'm still standing. I've still got my legs. It's a miracle. How many times did I almost get crushed between a car and a tree? So I completely understand where you're coming from with that. But
you put yourself on the outside of a corner where riders are coming in at 60, 70 k's an hour, and one of the things that all mountain bikers are trying to get is what's known as the roost shot, where they're sort of breaking into a corner and they're just creating this dust cloud behind them. And it makes for a great photo.
I've seen some of your work when you do that, and amazing. And it's the capturing, especially now that you told me that you're not really using flashes that much anymore. Capturing that rooster sort of tail, it's like, wow, it's amazing. So I was actually thinking about the placement. How you're talking about the thirds earlier on, which is one of the big things that we speak about here all the time, the thirds. So would you be placing the bike into the rear third and having the rider face plant in the forward third? When you're doing those action shots where the person's crashing.
I've one of the things that always seems to frustrate me a bit when I go to events is I always seem to miss the crashes. They always seem to happen just slightly below me, where I've just been 5 seconds ago. And I do move around quite a bit. I see a lot of mountain bike photographers that sort of sit there and just take shot after shot after shot of the same corner or the same feature. They end up with 1,000 shots of, the same part of the track.
They get that one shot, the front cover shot.
Whereas I like to move around, just keep moving, and I find that I pick up, more unique angles and different positions and so forth. Always experimenting, I suppose.
How many years have you done it for? Sorry.
The mountain bike sort of photography, I'd be getting on 10 years now.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah. Wow.
What I was going to just say is, it obviously comes with experience as well, doesn't it?
Oh, it does.
A lot of it. When you sort of start off, you spray and pray in a way. You know what I mean? And having that knowledge over that amount of years, it gives you that much better, understanding on where the riders are going to be, how it's going to happen, and all sort of stuff as well. So,
and being a rider myself,
that's right.
And I race a lot of these events. Quite often I'll go and do my race run and then quickly get back to the top and grab my camera and sail walking down the track.
Wow, with no broken legs, I hope.
That's determination.
That helps a lot. Just being able to know how a rider is likely to react before they actually hit a feature or go into a corner or over a jump.
That's interesting.
And as you said, over that course of time, I've changed my approach from the off-camera flash work to more natural photography, natural light. I've changed the settings I use on my camera, particularly my approach to focusing on the rider as they go past. That can be a massive challenge.
It is, definitely.
With moving targets and changing light conditions and all the rest of it. And there's nothing worse than getting the rider in perfect position, exactly what you had in mind, but then it's a soft focus. It makes you lose your mind.
Yeah, it's frustrating. Yeah.
So it's how do you actually do the focusing on that? So when I was doing some tripod work at a race once, I had the camera set up. The focus was in exactly the same place every time, and I just wait till the actual rider would actually be in front of the camera at that location. I knew it was already focused. Bang, and take the photo. So you're guaranteed to focus the picture beforehand. But I mean, if something was happening before or after that focus area that you're in, you wouldn't get it.
Yeah.
So how are you doing your focus?
Well, I'll use that technique when I'm doing pan shots, because typically with a pan shot, you're taking it from side on, and you get quite a bit of a distance. So even if they sort of move slightly forward or backwards in your frame, they're still going to be in reasonable focus, given the aperture that you're using with pan shots.
F30.
Yeah. Whereas most of the time I'll be using AI servo, like tracking the actual rider itself with a point focus. So I'll pick a point where within the composition of the frame, I'll move my focus point to that area of the frame. And then as the rider's coming in, I'm taking 3, 4, 5 shots. And while you might frame the shot intending them to catch them at a particular position or composition, at least that you're taking 7 shots a second with the 5D Mark IV, so you're going to get that the rider coming in or the frame just before where you intended them and just after, and while the one that you intended might not turn out perfect, you might find that you'll capture the one before or after, and it looks actually better than what you would think anyway. So I use the tracking focus a bit. Other photographers I know use more of the technique that you're talking about with picking a particular point and just focusing on capturing the rider right there. That takes some pretty amazing timing though to actually get them right where you intended them to be.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Are you using a tripod or using
handheld pretty much all the time. Sometimes I'll use a monopod for panning. Because it's so much easier to sort of pan and keep it from going up and down while you're doing so. But handheld all the time.
Oh, can I ask what lens? What were your choice of lenses?
I love my. I've got a 16-35 f2.8,
which is
Canon.
My choice of lens. Sorry, I love that lens. That's my favourite go-to lens.
It.
Landscape photography on that one is,
it's unbelievable, and it's it's just wide enough to capture the riders when they're really in close.
Yeah, okay.
Sometimes I sort of think I'd love to have a 14 or even 12 to get a real fisheye, but I don't think I would use it enough.
You have to be pretty close to the subject, though, wouldn't you?
You would, yeah. I mean, even with the 16, at 16 mil, you got to get in real close. As I said earlier, you find yourself in some pretty dangerous positions with that.
I've actually got a fisheye that I think it was a 6 inch, was 16 or 15, something like that. And I was trying to do some photography, and I was trying to take a photo of a Coke can, and I had to get so close to the Coke can that I actually didn't realize, because I was looking through the lens and it looked like it was still quite far away. And I actually hit the Coke can with the front of the lens.
Yeah.
Because it still looked like it was like half a metre away from me. You know, so that would probably be suicide out of the bike tracks. You know, let's just get my face straight into that front wheel and see, you know, so... but
and I've obviously got a telephoto, the 70 to 300.
Okay, yep. That's a F4?
F4 to 5.6.
Yeah, okay, yep.
Looking back, I think I'd probably prefer to have the 70 to 200, 2.8,
2.8,
just because it'd be a bit quicker. And from what I've heard, the focus is a little quicker. It doesn't hunt quite as much as the 70 to 300 that I've got. I do find that can be frustrating. You know, I'd lose quite a lot of shots, I think, using that lens.
Especially in low light conditions. Those lenses tend to go backwards and forwards when it's really dark. Yeah. So, you know... it's unfortunate.
So they're the two lenses that I use almost all the time. Other than that, sometimes I've got a 100 mil macro, which comes out every once in a while, just for more sort of portrait-like work on the side of the track and down in the event space and so forth.
And that'll be like a 2.8, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
That's a F30, I believe. That particular lens.
Is it?
Yeah, it's an F30, the 100
Possibly.
macro. Yeah. The L series.
We don't shoot.
No, it's not the L series. It's only
Sorry, no, because the one that I've got an F30, which I'd never actually come across an F30 before, so it was quite unique. But yeah, so it's should try using my one time. Take it out for a spin.
Daniel, keep that thought. If you go on the shoot, would you just bring one body, or would you bring multiple camera bodies?
No, I'll just bring one body.
Yeah.
It'd be great it would be great to have an extra body just as a backup. But I've found, I've never had a problem with the 5D Mark IV. It's a very consistent.
Yeah. I've got a Mark III as well, and I mean, I found that as a workhorse.
Yeah.
And the Mark IV is pretty much exactly the same. So they're great.
Even in, like, I've shot in some pretty horrendous weather conditions. Like up at Cairns, it was an absolute torrential downpour monsoon. We've had snow up at freezing cold snow up at Mount Buller and Mount Borbor and so forth, and it's just never missed a beat.
Look, those cameras or those bodies, I totally agree with you. I mean, I've been to Iceland and I've shot in Iceland in -20, and I actually left the camera outside shooting the Northern Lights, a time lapse of it, and it was out there for about 2 hours by itself, so and it's still going, so no problems whatsoever. I totally agree.
How does the Sony hold up to those types of conditions?
Here we go. I can't tell you that. I haven't actually been to any extreme places with the Sony, but I'm guessing it will be fine.
But you'd have to just clean the sensor every 5 seconds.
Yeah, well, that's the problem.
Sorry, Marty.
With the Sony, Daniel, I found that I'm getting a lot of dust on the sensor.
Okay.
And with the Canon, never had that problem. Yeah. But with the Sony, I had to clean my sensor probably about 3 times in about a year because it keep on blowing it out and keep on getting sensor dust, and it's just so frustrating, especially when I'm doing my time lapses. Yeah. Where you got a subject moving and then it's just like a massive dust spot in the middle, and it's just like you can't Photoshop.
In 500 frames as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it gets frustrated. Yeah. So Evan loves to point that out.
I do not love pointing that out. Thank you very much. But so Daniel, and how does a person get into this type of photography? I mean, how did you get into it? Did you just rock up one day with a camera and start taking photos, or did someone ask you?
No, pretty much. It sort of evolved from just I had an interest in photography, and I was at a mountain bike event and decided to keep taking photos, and people liked them. I think. If you're, like I said, if you're a rider, it helps a lot. You you've got this innate knowledge as to what forms a good shot, I suppose. I'd also say that mountain bikers, like I guess a lot of sort of sport, everyone these days is into social media and they want a photo that's they can chuck on their Instagram or whatever it might be. A lot of my photos are sold through that way, like the ones that I do actually sell are either sold for personal use on social media, or it might be the parents, getting in touch with me and saying, oh, it was my kid's first race, or they got first place or whatever, and they want a photo that they can print up for whatever purpose. Yeah, I'd say, if you're interested in photography and you want to give mountain bike photography a go, the best way is just to turn up to an event, take photos. No one's ever going to bat an eyelid of you, coming along and taking photos.
Would you need special permission or anything like that?
No, actually, no. I've looked at BMX events, and BMX Australia have regulations in relation to, obviously, important matter, protecting children and privacy and so forth.
Yep.
And you have to actually get a permit through BMX Australia for that.
Mm-hmm.
Mountain biking, it just never seems to have happened there.
Okay.
I'm not sure why that is. Maybe Mountain Biking Australia have been a little bit less litigious
I guess from a point of view is they do wear full screen, full face helmet in a way as well. So you can't really tell faces, or you can't pinpoint specific.
And you do
people.
tend to. I'd say also you don't tend to get as young children doing mountain bike
fairly
events
dangerous
as BMXing.
Yeah. Do you think it's more dangerous mountain biking than BMXs, or do you think it's sort of on par?
I'd say it's pretty much on par.
Yeah.
Recently we've had 2 Australians that have ended out with almost life-changing injuries in BMXing.
Is this the Olympic thing? Or
I'm trying to think of his name. One guy that got a medal in the most recent Olympics, not Tokyo ones, but Rio. He's now effectively a paraplegic from a broken neck. And then you probably saw, if you watched the Olympics in the BMX, there was a girl, Saya Sakakibara. Don't know whether I pronounced that perfectly. She was representing Australia. She's representing Australia, and her brother had quite a severe crash a few months ago. And he's months and months of recovery from that.
Yeah, right.
So I don't think you can really say that mountain biking's more or less dangerous. I guess the advantage of mountain biking is you're not riding in a pack like in BMX racing.
True.
There's 8 of them riding at the same time on the same track. Mountain biking, you're on your own. And ultimately, it comes down, I think, to the individual riders and how much risk they're willing to take themselves.
Yeah. I'm guessing they're wearing a full gear, like safety gear and all that sort of stuff as well, right?
Yeah. Quite often, more and more now these days, you're wearing a full face helmet, you're wearing body armor, gloves, knee pads, all the rest of it. So you are pretty well protected. But every once in a while, they get pretty severe injuries.
Yeah, of course. Well, I've done Yangs, which is, people don't, obviously not in Australia or Melbourne. Yangs is one of the fairly large off-road, mountain biking, courses that, and I've had a bit of a stack there as well, and and Evan remembers because it was my own fault because we were riding at the same time, chatting at the same time, and we're not going slow. So I turned around and straight smack into a tree, and I can still, one of my my elbow still sort of a bit out of whack out of that. So dangerously dangerous. I've had my fair share of injuries. I've had a number of broken collarbones. I've got one that I've now got a plate and 14 screws in my collarbone. Ouch.
And broken ribs, etc. So,
actually, on that note, there was a post that you put up recently about a helmet that saved your life.
That was actually at the Yangs as well.
It was like in 2 or 3 different pieces.
Yeah.
Is there a story behind it? That's not too painful to bring up.
No, that was it was one of the Yang's race events the club's put on out there. And as you might have seen as you're riding around some of the trails out there, they've got these sort of logs that have been just off the side of the tracks. I've seen that, they're sort of their intention, I think, is to keep people on the track.
Correct.
So rather than cutting corners. And it wasn't even that much of an extreme part of the track, if you like. I was just pedaling really hard, being a race run. And all of a sudden the rear wheel's gone out from underneath me and my head's just ended up smacking sideways onto the end of one of those logs.
Yep.
It's a walking, talking example of why you really need to be wearing helmets when you're riding a bike.
I think it's very dangerous. I mean, not just a bike. I mean, I ride my one wheel, I ride my skateboard, electric skateboard, and totally agree. I mean, the safety gear is, people take it for granted. And you might sometimes look dorky and whatever else, but you know what? Who cares?
Yeah.
If it's going to save your ass, it's definitely going to work out. You know, I mean, I've actually came off my one wheel at about 30 k's an hour as well, and I've cracked my helmet too. And I definitely was thankful that I was wearing it. You know what I mean? I was out of action for about a week as well, and you know, it's very important to be able to get good gear and actually wear it and actually, you know.
Yep.
Yeah. Evan?
It's actually interesting that you mentioned those logs on the tracks at Yang's, because I've had a similar occurrence. I was doing a night run, the Gazebo series, which was a cross-country race that was happening on the cross-country side. And I was flying through the flow track, probably 38, 40 kilometres an hour. And I came across one of those logs, hit the front of it, clipped it, back wheel clipped, I lost control of the bike, went straight into a tree, smashed my face into the tree. Ironically, my face was fine. Can you see? No, actually, people would question that, and they would say, no, your face is not fine. But I actually ended up hitting my leg into the tree as well, and I tore my leg open, and blood was gushing out everywhere. And I kept racing, and I probably did another 2 to 3 laps before my leg completely froze up, because I had actually done some damage to the knee. But yeah, it sounds like those pieces of wood there are more trouble than they're worth.
Possibly.
Yeah.
There's been plenty of people that have commented on whether they should be there or not, but
yeah,
I guess they're more to save the environment rather than you.
Well, it definitely serves a purpose, but they're so easy to clip, especially if you are flying along on the flow tracks down there. You pick up some crazy speeds. And
can I just, for those people that are listening and don't know what's Yangs, can you guys just explain what it is? I mean, you know, it's a fairly big.
It's a medium, I suppose, mountain range situated just out to the west of Melbourne, near Werribee. It's quite a rocky sort of granite environment. You know, not so much, you know, your typical Australian bush. It's more, you know, what I guess you'd liken it to, I don't know, African tundra or something maybe.
Wow.
Something different.
The tracks are quite sandy, gravelly surface. A lot of rocks, as I said. A lot of the features are rocks. There's probably, I'm just guessing, a couple of 100 kilometres worth of trails out there in total.
Much. I don't think we've done. We've only done probably about 50 or 60 k's of actual trails.
Yeah, there's heaps. When you cross over to the other side, because there's 2 sections to the Yangs. You've got the cross-country section, and then you've got the downhill sort of section. And there's a dividing track. I think it's track 14, is it? Or track 4?
Junction track, I think it's called.
Yeah, so and that's actually a really interesting track, because you've got your downhill slalom, you got your rock ledges, you've got your a massive climb up. I don't think I've taken you on that track actually.
I'm just scared of that.
Once you've done it the first time and you don't think about it and you just ride over everything, it's great fun. If you're actually thinking about what you're doing, that's when things go very tragically wrong. Like you see the rock and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to die. And that usually happens. So you've got to just basically ride those rock ledges without thinking about it.
And how often do they do events there? Is it sort of every couple of months, or is it sort of...
well, I think typically Yang's club themselves, I think, might run maybe 3 to 4 events per year total.
That's the downhill side?
Yeah, on the downhill side
because
primarily.
the cross country is actually run by another club, I believe the Geelong club, I think it is.
You might be right.
They split it, so.
There's as Evan's alluding to, there's sort of a flatter, mellower area.
That's where I go.
Yeah,
you're calling us mellow.
Currajong, I think it's called that side. And then there's the Stockyards area, which is where the Youyangs Mountain Bike Club actually hold their events. So they have one of probably the biggest one is Cressy's Descent, which is coming up in September. And that one normally attracts about 300 competitors, I believe, and then a huge amount of spectators and so forth. They generally will hold an enduro race as well, which is sort of like a held on 3 or 4 tracks, and they combine the time that you take to get down the tracks. Typically, an enduro event, you're timed on the way down, but you pedal back up again. The Youyangs one is a little bit different, where they actually allow you to jump on a shuttle and get back up.
Really?
It's the type of racing I love.
I didn't realise they were doing shuttles. I know they do shuttles, runs and stuff like that, but not as part of the competition, so it's interesting.
And other than that, they do quite regular, like monthly ride days, so where they shuttle riders back to the top via the road out there. So
I must say I've never been to any of the events actually. To be honest with you,
it's a really great sort of club. I think they've got a great group of people, quite a large number of members. Probably one of the bigger clubs member wise around Melbourne.
I guess with COVID and everything else now, we can't so specifically tell you dates or anything like that. But is there like a specific time of the year that they actually make it in like January, February, or anything like that?
Typically, they avoid the real hot months out at the Youyangs because it's really just not nice to ride out there. And anything higher than sort of 28 or 30 degrees, it just gets really harsh. There's no shade. So they typically will run their event either in the sort of early winter or into spring.
Okay.
That's typically when they'll run their events.
Okay, good.
Other than that, there's the Victorian Downhill Series, which I travel around with and do photography of quite a bit. That's held more throughout the summer months, from sort of October through to about May. There's all sorts of other things going on, like King of Ballarat, which is run by Club Mud in Ballarat. That's sort of more of an introduction to downhill. That's the way I view it as. They have a lot of young kids that turn up to that. That one's been a tricky one to run this year because of the COVID regulations. It was cancelled last year. And
I think COVID just threw everything out of the... Yeah, that's right.
And the Red Hill Riders, which is my club down on the Mornington Peninsula, we've actually got the Enduro National Championships on there later this year. I think it's in November. Looking forward to that.
So how many locations? I know there was Lesterfield and then Youyangs. Is there any others in Melbourne, or is it the main ones?
They're probably the closest to Melbourne and Red Hill. Red Hill's quite popular now. They've had a lot of trails that have been formalised in recent years. Other than that, there's plenty of venues around. There's Buxton,
towards Bendigo. There's a couple of
Lake Mountain, Harcourt's quite popular now.
Because I know in summer, Mount Buller organises something like downhill mountain biking stuff as well.
Yeah, Mount Buller. They're not running the lifts recently, but during the summer months again, obviously they can't run mountain bikes up there at the moment in the winter, but in the summer, that's again sort of been one of the old school, places to go, if you like, particularly for downhill riding. But they've got a whole bunch of other sort of more cross country orientated riding up there as well.
Yeah, right.
You can ride all the way down from the top of Mount Buller to the base, and then up to the top of Mount Sterling, and then back again if you want.
Yeah, I've never done it before, and I'm hoping Evan's going to one day organise it. Maybe all three of us can make it. But you're looking at me like
I'll bring the camera.
But look, I think
e-bike would be the way to go up there.
Yeah, he hates his bikes.
I've actually ridden Bulla, not the downhill section because I'm not a downhill rider. I've tried it a few times, it's just not my forte. I know where to draw the line. You know, like I've done it. I've said, you know, I've managed to do it without killing myself, and that's probably the best I'll ever ask for. You know, I do a lot of the cross country stuff, and a lot of the Bulla things that I've done. There's one which is like 45k straight down. Well, it's not straight down. But there's a few river crossings and stuff. Very picturesque. I've actually done a whole bunch of GoPro footage, which I put into a little video, created a little video.
I think the high country overall it's amazing as well. You know, for that particular.
And Tasmania as well. Like
that's the mecca at the moment.
Cannot praise Tasmania enough. Every time in normal years, I'd travel down there 3 or 4 times a year. And they've got places like Derby, St Helens, Medina.
Wow.
You know, just even Mount Wellington, which is like literally on the outskirts of Hobart. And just, you know, the trails and the environment that you go through down there almost makes our trail networks that we have in Victoria look pretty bad.
Yeah. I was going to say Tasmania is pretty much the sort of the wilderness part of Australia, though, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, it's like there's so much national parks and just amazing locations. And I mean, you know, I'm into hiking as well, and you know, hopefully, I can do the overland track as well there. And you know, that's not a mountain biking track, but you know, nevertheless, you know, it's amazing locations, definitely.
Yeah,
I totally agree.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Quick question for you. Listerfield, which we touched on before, we haven't really mentioned too much about Listerfield. It used to be a place to go to, and they actually ran the Olympic Games there.
The Commonwealth Games.
Yeah, the Commonwealth, sorry, yes. And they built the track, and they put the people who built the track there at the time for the games put these massive gravel, like train gravel pieces across the track. And just before the games, they had to actually remove all of them. But if you go down there nowadays, you still find pieces of it here and there scattered everywhere. So yeah, that was an interesting one. But do they do races there at all, or is it?
Yeah. They've got there is a particular cross country race event they have there annually most years. Can't remember the name of it. Something to do with a goat, because it was named after a wild goat that was walking around the Listerfield reserve there. I think the poor goat passed away a few years ago, but it's cross country mainly. I mean, you just don't have the elevation there to hold a descending type race, but it's a great spot because it's you know, smack bang right in the middle of suburbs. And the only problem that then raises is the fact that it gets overused. You know, you go there on a weekend, particularly, you know, during COVID recently, it's just so overrun with people. And the tracks get worn out,
especially during the wet season.
It doesn't cope that well with rain.
As opposed to the Yuyangs, where it just rains and it just drains straight out.
It just disappears.
It's like beach sand. It's actually funny because in this side of Melbourne, like the west and sort of south area of Victoria, I should say, the conditions are a lot different. They're like more dry and acrid. You go on the other side, like the east side, and it's a lot more rainforesty. And Listerfield is pretty much like that. It's always wet. There's a lot of shade. It's a beautiful place to be. You go to the Yuyangs and it's like bone dry, and you know, so it's a very different environment. I think Hardcourt is also very dry as well.
Yeah, it's similar to the Yuyangs. It's granite rock, sandy soil, and it copes very well with weather. And that's, you know, one of the beautiful things about mountain biking, as I alluded to earlier. It takes you into some just this huge, vast, different areas that you otherwise wouldn't get to. I've even ridden right smack in the middle of the Flinders Ranges. There's actually some trails out there.
Yeah.
You want to go there in the colder months because you can't ride in when it's 40 plus out there.
Yeah.
And you know, I've ridden all across, you know, the Alpine ranges and Tasmania, and one day I'll be allowed to go somewhere else outside of Australia. But we're not lacking for those environments around Australia.
Yeah, definitely. Now, breaking away from the sports photography, you also do landscape photography, and much to Marty's satisfaction, you also do drone photography. So a bit of everything. What got you into landscape stuff? Because I've seen you posting a lot more landscape lately.
Yeah, probably primarily because of when there's no events on, I suppose. But landscape, I've always even when I was sort of a fairly young kid, I've been an outdoors sort of kid. I actually grew up in Mount Macedon, and spent I'd say most of my youth from the age of about 10 through to 18, 19, actually rock climbing. So I spent a lot of time up in the Grampians and Mount Arapiles up there, and Blue Mountains near Sydney. And I've just always loved that sort of nature and just landscapes in general. And even more so now when I've got lucky enough to have a job that takes me to places like Tasmania, and allows me to just experience whatever it is that's out there. And it's also one of those sorts of genres of photography, I suppose, unlike mountain biking, where you can really take your time, and you might go to a waterfall or a creek or somewhere and just spend an hour or so just thinking about what do you want to capture in your photo. What does this place mean to you? What are you feeling? And really soaking it all in. So that's one of the things I love about the landscape photography is it's an escape and stress relief, and
I totally agree. And I think with landscape you can just relax and look at the actual environment and just enjoy the environment as itself. When I set up my camera and just take a couple of images, it's just you look at it and then you can capture what you're seeing on that camera, and if you get a chance to print it large or whatever else, it's just an extra like a wow factor for me. So
absolutely. Now that you've got access to things like 30 or 50 megapixel sensors, the size of the print that you can get out of them and the detail is incredible.
Yeah, it is, you're right.
And one of the things I like to do with landscape photography as well, I see a lot of people going to the same spots like the 12 Apostles, is it Cradle Mountain, those sorts of things, and just getting that, so almost copying what they've seen off Instagram or whatever it is that they've shot. I'd like to put that little bit of extra effort in to try and find something unique, even if it's the same sort of subject that you're shooting. Try and shoot it from a different perspective. For instance, Cradle Mountain, when I went there fairly recently, it was pretty much right in the middle of winter, and let me tell you don't want to drive up there in the middle of winter. It's very sketchy. The road was like ice, but I just thought this is going to be something that's totally different and not a lot of people shoot. Climbed all the way up to pretty much the summit of Cradle Mountain in almost whiteout conditions, and shot those sort of bluffs from the rocks, looking upwards at the clouds and then disappearing into the clouds. And I just love trying to go to that extra mile and trying to capture something that nobody's actually ever shot before. The other thing that does as well is it sort of, there's a bit of an opinion, I suppose, online at the moment that, if you post a photo of a particularly beautiful spot, then you're almost encouraging 50 other people to go there and trample all over the landscape and, ruin it. And I've seen that happen myself. There's this great spot just outside of Hobart called Secret Falls.
Not so secret.
It's not so secret anymore. And now, the first time I went there, all of the earth and the rocks and everything was just covered in this beautiful green moss. And you go there now, and that's just gone. There's not a trace of it.
Now it's just covered
It's just
in plastic
mud
bottles.
and
Plastic bottles,
yeah.
disposable ones.
No, it's not that bad yet, but hopefully it doesn't get that bad.
Yeah, that's one of the things that happens with things like Instagram, and a lot of people go off and they take these photos, and everyone's like, "Oh, we're gonna do the same one," and they go off and do exactly the same thing, and then 50 people rock up on the step and everything, and it's okay if you go there and do exactly the same shot, but you
Take
don't
care of it.
Yeah, you don't have to destroy everything while you're there.
Exactly.
And that's Marty and I are both 4-wheel drivers as well. And one of the things we used to adhere to was tread lightly. You go out there to enjoy the environment, not to destroy it, and and not leave it for anyone else.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, not everyone thinks the same way, and there is a lot of destruction out there, unfortunately. But yeah. Drones. So you're doing drone stuff as well. What type of drone have you got?
I've got a Mavic Air 2. Air 2, sorry. I'm thinking the 2S just came out. So, it's an Air 2. I get a little bit confused about all the different models out there. But, I did have previously the Mavic Spark. Managed to crash that into a tree, and then it fell down into a ravine. So that died.
So I'm not the only person who destroys drones. Yes.
I think it's a rite of passage when you get into drones that you're going to lose one once in a while. The Spark was okay for a beginner drone, but the image quality was never that great. The battery life wasn't that great either. The Air 2 is great. I think, for what I use it for, it's small enough to carry around. You're not carrying all the extra attachments and whatnot.
It's pretty impressive at the moment. The technology sort of reached so far that you can sort of even just control that drone with your phone. Yeah. And, you do have actually a fair bit of distance to be able to control it too.
Yeah. So I still get a little bit nervous flying over water and whatnot. You just spent $1,700 on a drone. You don't want to splash it somewhere, but it's the technology has improved dramatically. It just seems the connection's so much more reliable. Whereas the Spark used to be wirelessly connected from your phone to the remote control, and then the remote control to the drone. This is actually plugged. The phone is plugged into the remote control.
Very low latency, though, isn't it? Yeah.
So I found that far, a massive improvement compared to the Spark. And the responsiveness, the distance at which this thing can go, and the speed, and
it's almost scary.
It's now a 48 megapixel sensor on it, so it's pretty amazing.
No, I totally agree. And the thing is, as well, with those drones, you can take long exposures too. Yeah. So it's got a tripod mode. I know my Mavic's got it, but he's got a tripod mode, and the whole camera, you can take 2-3 second exposures.
I haven't quite gotten around to trying the long exposures yet, but I have always sort of wanted to fly it over a waterfall and take a shot of a long exposure of the waterfall from above.
It's pretty cool.
But just haven't really gotten around to it. And the location's always tricky to find one where you can actually do that.
Yeah.
It's also just adds that just a totally different perspective from what you can capture on the ground. Often where for instance, on a recent trip out to Central Australia, you go to all the places that you Cooper Pedy and Alice Springs and Ayers Rock and Uluru and Uluru and Ayers Rock, same thing. Kings Canyon, and while an environment out there might just look like a plain desert from the ground level, if you fly a drone up and look back down, you just see all these patterns that you would never see.
Yeah.
So that's just something that I'm just being more and more intrigued about, I suppose, finding what I can do with that.
Using the technology to advantage. Good.
Yeah.
Nice.
Unique perspectives. Now, I love your photos. I think they're fantastic. I think everyone should go off and buy your photos when they're doing races and stuff that you've taken their photos. So go out and buy his photos. But where can people see your artwork?
I put all of my artwork on Facebook. I haven't gotten around to completing my website yet, just out of pure laziness, really. As I said, it's not my day job, so it's always one of those things that I mean to get around to doing and never quite get there.
So what would people type in to find you on Facebook?
Daniel Brooks Photography, on both Facebook and Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I do sell all of my photos that you can find on there. They're obviously reasonably low resolution on Facebook, but I've obviously archived all of the photos that I take. I'm sure you'd all agree with me. Most photographers, you sort of OCD with deleting anything, so
That's the scary part. Yeah.
You end up with thousands of dollars worth of hard drives and all the rest of it to keep them all on. But I've managed over the years to develop a process whereby somebody, for instance, at a mountain bike event can just tell me their race plate number from that event, and I'll just type it into Lightroom and pop up bangs all the photos of that.
Is that automated, or did you label them?
No, I've gone through manually and labelled them.
Jeez.
I'd love to find some process that can automatically identify race plate numbers, but I haven't been able to find that yet.
OCR software would be able to do that, but
there is software. I've actually used software in the past. I can't remember how much I paid for it, but yeah, you can just sort of scan the part of the image and it actually comes up with the numbers. So you just have to highlight the image, and then it will basically transport that into actual numbers or letters or whatever else.
So the big race events, the around the bay, that sort of thing, they have photographers every so often, and they have a system where they just download the photos and the computer actually generates the photo based on your plate, or there's a tag in the back. So I've gone back sometimes to have a look at photos of myself, and there's this other person there with long hair and and breasts, and I'm thinking that does not look that's a woman. I'm pretty sure that's a woman, and I'm not a woman. So it's not always 100% successful, but it is software that is available and makes your life a little bit easier.
That's labeling all the photos is one of the most tedious jobs of any photographer. I'd say
it's horrible.
You take 3,000 photos on a weekend or something at a race event, and just going through them all. Particularly if it's a very muddy event, the race plates are covered in mud. You're not going to read very many of them.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And there'll still be a lot in there that are pan shots, for example, and you've got no idea who the rider is. But 90% of my photos have been labelled from those race events. I've also got the geocoding now with the GPS on phones, on cameras.
Cameras, the 5D does that,
So that's helpful, I sell my photos from the events. I sell all my landscape shots, obviously in digital files, or if somebody is in need of it, I can arrange for a print to suit their needs.
Fabulous.
Yeah. It's amazing to see images printed. I mean, you can see some of my images that I've got in my studio, but when you see that actual on paper, it makes a huge difference, doesn't it?
Yep.
It does. It's amazing how different. Your screens are great, but having them in print, there's nothing quite like it.
What is last? Is it? Do we have time? I don't know how we're going with time.
Yep.
What does the future hold for you, Daniel? What are you thinking of? Short, long term, I guess.
I think I've always been interested to get into a bit more of the sort of behind the scenes teaching of photography. I've done a couple of workshops just as an experiment, I suppose, at race events. Just sort of educating on my thought process behind when I'm shooting, what I'm thinking about. More so, not so much the technical aspects of get this lens or shoot at this particular f-stop or whatever it might be.
Because anyone can do that.
Yeah, exactly. You can Google those settings up quite easily. It's more about how to compose an image and also I suppose the post-processing side of things as well. That's something that intrigues me. I sort of find it quite meditative in some aspects.
What do you use, can I ask?
Lightroom and Photoshop.
Yep. Okay.
Most of my mountain bike shots are just in Lightroom because you're really just doing basic edits to them.
Yep.
Whereas more and more so now with my landscape and even like some macro photography that I'm experimenting with. I recently got forgive me, I don't know how to pronounce it. Laowa.
Yeah, I've got that as well.
That's Marty's brand.
Yeah, absolutely magnificent lens.
I've got the probe lens. Yeah, I've got the probe lens, and it's just the stuff that you can get with it.
And very well priced as well.
Look, Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, it's not a cheap lens, but it's reasonable for what you get. Yeah, definitely.
I've got the 100mm 2x macro.
Okay.
And I've just sort of really started experimenting in focus stacking bugs and all sorts of tiny stuff.
Yeah,
and
that's pretty cool stuff.
That's amazing. I just find that incredible about like how much you can actually see. Getting an image that you just would never see with a human eye.
100%.
And you discover stuff like, it looks like a cool little bug. You take photos of it, and then you get it onto your PC, and you're like, oh my god, like, this thing's incredible.
It's hideous.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know about the Laowa 24mm probe lens. Have you heard about that lens?
Yeah. It's like a little thin.
Yeah, it's a very thin tube. It's about 450 mil or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, I've actually shot a few things, and I mean, it's next to impossible, but I've actually shot a fly with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where the good thing about that lens is it's non-invasive in a way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you don't get that close to the subject itself.
Yeah.
So that's why, it is a manual focus, unfortunately, but, you can sort of still, focus pull and whatever else with the whole, with the whole camera, I guess. But yeah, look, if you are into that sort of stuff, it's the Laowa 24mm or macro, any of the stuff, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, it'd be really cool for doing, close-up video work as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's impressive, because you can actually put it on the slider and actually get that, macro sliding shot as well.
Yeah.
Which is really, really impressive, so, yeah.
Sorry, just one quick question. With your tuition that you were talking about, if someone's interested in learning about what you do and basically following in your footsteps, how can they contact you? Obviously, Facebook, Instagram, but is there a phone number?
0417 921 025.
So people can just give you a call and you can organise something with them?
Yep.
Fabulous. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Look, Daniel, thank you very much for coming in tonight. It's been a treat. It has been. I love your work, and it's basically being able to have you in the studio today was a huge pleasure for us.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Pleasure coming.
Yeah, that was good fun. I think we talk about these things and just educate people as well from our end. What can be achieved and how it can be achieved. So having professionals like yourself, it definitely is a big plus for us too. So thank you.
Definitely. Well, that's come to the end of another session. So thank you very much for tuning in. Don't forget, if you'd like to subscribe, hit the subscribe button and you'll be notified.
Focus.
Yeah, Seeking Focus.
Seeking Focus podcast on Facebook, I think it is, and Seeking Focus on Instagram too. I can't remember now.
We're on there. We're everywhere. We're also on the Apple Store. We're on the Apple Podcast Store. Yeah. So Google Spotify.
Spotify.
Too.
That's what I've been watching you from, or listening to you from.
Yeah. I love driving in the car, listening to podcasts, and that's fantastic having it there.
I think once all the COVID and everything is over, we've got to do a long trip and maybe go Mount Buller or something, mountain biking.
Yeah, and we can use the Road Go-2s that we spoke about in the previous session as recorders, so we can do interviews while we're riding next to people.
A lot of wind.
Yeah, just hear boom, bam.
My leg.
If you want to get in contact with us, you can reach out to myself, Evan, at pixellifestudio.com.au, and Marty.
And Marty at melbourneimages.com.au as well.
Fabulous. All right, well, guys, thank you.
All the best. Ciao.
Ciao, bye.
Thanks, Daniel.